welcome to Like It Is. This edition will focus on the piano and two men of exceptional proficiency at that instrument, Art Tatum and Phineas Newborn. We'll get underway in just a moment.
If you've got $1 and you've got a daily news, you might already be a millionaire. Check your dollar, check the news, and play Millionaire Lucky Bucks, only in the day.
The piano is an instrument that many credit with having origins in Africa and was additionally developed in Europe. Here in this nation, many have drawn great beauty out of the piano, but few have matched the two pianists that we explore today. Art Tatum is generally acknowledged as the colossus of the instrument. Although he died on November 4th of 1956, musicians still speak his name in awe. We'll try to show you why. Phineas Newborn is alive. He's in his early 50s. One might regard him then as a musical offshoot of Art Tatum, and a brilliant one. There's glory and sorrow in the story of Mr. Newborn, a diminutive man with a technique that could take your breath away. This is Phineas Newborn today, some 25 years later. Like It Is filmed him at the Sweet Basil nightclub in Greenwich Village in late 1983. There was a marked difference in the man. He is physically aged, but even more obvious was his playing. He was good, but somehow not quite the same. His playing seemed hesitant, as though he wasn't as sure of himself anymore. what we say here is most difficult to express. This man is a revered artist who is still making a living at his craft. Mr. Newborn is in his early 50s and should still be in the fullest cry of his ability. And even without functioning at his full measure of brilliance, he's still better than most. And yet it's perhaps because of his importance as an artist that we feel compelled to note his decline and try to find out why it occurred. Jamil Nasser was the bassist with Mr. Newborn at our filming. Mr. Nasser has known Phineas since they were kids.
Oh, since I was about 4 years old.
Really?
Mm-hmm. We lived about a block and a half from one another.
Really?
And he was born in that house. I was born in the house about 10 blocks away. And then we moved closer when I was 4 years old.
When did you start getting interested in music, and when did he? Do you
Well,
remember?
you know, that's a tough question because I think it happened by natural process for me. I really wanted to be in sports. And so I got a much later start than Phineas, because Phineas had a piano teacher almost ever since I knew him. And I know he went through piano teachers so fast. You know, he outgrew them at a rapid pace.
Mm.
And I think his first piano teacher was the most impressive to him, because when she gave him the basics, this is the way of genius. Once he knew the basics, he had all the rest figured out. You know, that's the difference between genius and ordinary people like myself.
What was the attraction in sports?
Boxing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
So then when did you get the message that boxing was not for you and perhaps something else would do, namely music?
Well, one night after I won, I looked in the mirror, and I couldn't believe it.
After you won?
Yeah, a unanimous decision. And I said, no, that's not for me. I was sort of like Muhammad Ali about my face.
Uh-huh.
And I said, no. So I went down to the band the following day and enlisted to play tuba in the band.
But you remained close friends with Phineas in Memphis?
Always, yeah,
It
always.
was a family of brothers.
Two brothers, yes. Calvin Newborn, the guitarist, fine guitarist. And he also played flute, and he played trombone. And Phineas played anything he touched.
Really?
Phineas could play trumpet, saxophone, just drums, anything.
Well?
Well, exceptionally well. He could have been either one of those that he wanted to be, and would have had to be something to deal with.
How old was he when he was a fully developed talent?
Oh, 12 or 13.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, he was always being pulled out of school to do special performances, you know, at the city hall and different schools around the city. He was gone more than he was in school.
Was he playing jazz or all kinds of music?
Well, you know, he had a talent for playing almost anything. He was a boogie-woogie specialist. He had a rhythm and blues act, you know, with his father's band. And they could send people into a frenzy, you know, just from the piano. He was always a swinger, more or less. And he had the technique all along. You know, I can't remember when he didn't have the technique. That, you know, a lot of people make issue over technique. We never were impressed with technique, you know, and we never thought of Phineas as having technique. We just thought of him as a guy who could play, who could just play anything comes in his head, sort of stand you on in, you know.
Hmm. Where did he get that influence from when he really hit the scene big in the 50s?
Well,
he really started blowing everybody
well, you know,
away.
see, Memphis was a city. It's unfortunate because New Orleans got all the publicity, but you have to remember that Jimmy Lunceford's band came out of Memphis. W.C. Handy, when he got to Memphis, he couldn't leave, you know, and that's when you start getting all that wonderful music of W.C. Handy. And at that time, he had been to New Orleans, he had been to Kansas City, he had been, you know, all the places. But there was so much happening on Beale Street in variety. And we were raised in that variety, plus the level of artistry that was demanded of us. You know, we had to be excellent. And we had excellent teachers like Bill Harvey and Anzi Horn, and just a whole group of people that made sure that we would not be ordinary musicians.
Well, now, how did they exact these demands on the bandstand, or was there a school, or was there after-hours joints?
No, it was OJT, on-the-job training. You know, they would fire you in a second if you weren't doing it. But on the other hand, they expected you to come back and ask them how to do it. You know, so it was a very gentle treatment in some cases and a very rough treatment in others. Because if they saw that you were kidding around when you should be serious, they were very hard on you.
How would they be hard on you? What would they do?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. Bill Harvey, who was an excellent arranger and an excellent saxophonist, tenor saxophonist, would tell you, learn these songs well. And then one night he would come on and he'd say, okay, we're going to play this a third higher, you know, which means, you know, a third higher than the key that you're accustomed to. And then he'd say 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you were expected not to make any mistakes. And when you did, he could make his eyes this big, you know, and in front of all the public and everything. He didn't have to say anything. He would just come to you and just stare, you know, and the people would be going crazy. Well, you'd be so embarrassed that that would never happen again. Other times, I was fired from the back of a dance hall, and there was only one way out. And family and friends and neighborhood people and everybody were there. But the guy knew what he was doing.
So, in other words, you had to learn your music in all keys, all your tunes, you had to know in all keys,
If you knew it, you were supposed to be able to play it anywhere it was called. And that was our foundation. And Phineas, getting back to Phineas, he was laughing at those little problems that we were having because he had taken that and he had gone on somewhere else. You know, he became an island early.
What do you mean when you say an island?
Well, see, when you pass over from just being, say, exceptionally great into genius, then you become an island. You know, like the Tatums, even Louis Armstrong, you know, after he passed a certain point, he became an island. You take Charlie Parker, you know, this is genius. So after they pass a certain point, you can't compare. See, I wasn't excited by Bud Powell, you know, as the New Yorkers were when I came. Because first of all, we had heard Phineas, and we had heard Oscar Denard. See, that's another genius from St. Petersburg, Florida. And they used to meet, and it would be like more music than you'd ever want to hear.
Was Phineas a contemporary of Bud Powell? I would have thought Bud was much older than...
Yeah, we all came up listening to Bud. You understand? But he wasn't as exciting as Phineas, let me put it that way. Because Phineas was two-fisted. Single line, you know, with the company in the left hand and the singer. But Phineas was like, he would do all that, you know, with one hand. And he used to play games with Bud Powell solos, you know, where he playing Bud's line with the left hand and comping with the right. And then he'd do something else in here, you know, with this hand. You know, it was like comedy. You know, he'd take it and make comedy. And also so equipped that he could hear an Art Tatum thing and say, that's great, man, listen to what he did. Here's what he did. He never imitated art, but he would go to the piano and say, listen to that. You know what he did? And instant, you know, he had it. And, you know, that's why I say we weren't really excited about New York, to tell you the truth, because the guys prepared us in such a way that they made...
You were already in the promised land.
That's right. That's right. And see, we had Beale Street was more history happened on Beale Street I think, than almost any other place in the country over the years. You know, like Kansas City had a period, you know, when Prez and Charlie Park and all of them. Detroit had a period when Bad and, you know, and all that group out there. Then you had Chicago, you know, they had the Johnny Griffins and like that. But see, what Memphis had, you know, everybody who came here to Chicago, New York, and places like that, they came from the South. You know, everybody who was anything came from that long line, that long lineage, going back to pre-W.C. Handy, to pre-Jimmy Lunsford. And Bill Street was active. It was action all the time.
So this is the soil out of which Phineas grew.
That's right. Ma Rainey, you know, the whole works. You know, we had some terrific, dynamic people down there.
And for, I guess, about a decade, maybe two, he was just blowing everybody away.
That's
with
right.
this scorching technique.
As a matter of fact, he was our secret weapon. You know, if people who didn't know him, we'd slip him in on them, you know, because you take a pianist, a horn player, come in town, and so Phineas was our secret weapon, you know. We'd go wake him up out of the bed and say, come on, here's a guy out here, man, he's really playing better than you. And, you know, this got his dand up, so when he would get there, he would really show off, you know.
I've just had one of my best buying trips ever. It was so good, I think I'm in trouble.
We're already stocked to the rafters with carpets from America's top mills. To make room, I'm cutting the price of my 12 best-selling carpets in half Monday and
See, Phineas and I came to New York together in 1956. That's a vow that we made as children almost, that we would come to New York together. He came to New York under one of the biggest press campaigns, I think, of any musician. I don't think Art Tatum got the press. We had 3-page spread in Esquire, the whole works. And till then, no jazz artists had been in, no black jazz artists had been in Esquire at all. I don't even think Nat Cole had been in there.
Not even Ellington, huh?
Which was, you know, Nat Cole was a great influence on all of us, too. But when we got to New York...
As a pianist, Nat was.
Yes, that's right. That's what I mean. I was a singer. He impressed us on his piano. We got to New York, and, you know, the glitter and the glamour and this and that. And Phineas was a person who didn't ever have to take care of any business. You know, everything was laid out for him. You know, as a matter of fact, his father spoiled him, and I think we all spoiled him because we wouldn't let him do anything for himself. So what would be a small problem to you, a normal person, was a big one to him. So when he got the biggies, well, came from bad business arrangements. And at one point in his life, he stood up and he wanted to be his own man. And he said, I want to record for this record company. I want to go with this booking agency. I want to do that. And what happened, there was a boycott put on Phineas, and I call it a white list. You know, we have many victims. This white list has caused a lot of great American tragedies. And I can go all the way back to Blind Tom, you know, and show you these tragedies. I can itemize them all the way up. Whereas when you go on that white list, nothing ever works for you again. And you never come off of it.
You mean he tried to break away from the established order?
The established order that was laid out for him.
He tried to...
He wanted to change that order.
There were a few major booking conglomerates, and he tried to break away from them without calling names?
Sometimes when you lift the covers, you see strange bedfellows. And so where you think you're just working with this booking agency or that record company or that this and that, you'll find that it's all...
They're all in the family.
So when one says thumbs down, not only do that little conglomerate there says thumbs down, but everything around it says thumbs down. His wife was pregnant with the first child. No work, no possibility of any work. A genius like that, just think about that, you know, that gets me all over again, you know, no possibility. Anyway, Roy Haynes and I hired him to work in Birdland for a 3-week engagement. And we decided we were going to split the money in thirds because we knew that Dottie was pregnant and that that baby would be coming at any time, snow on the ground and all this. His money was garnished. Anywhere he worked, his money was garnished. So I just finished telling you that what was a big problem, a small problem to you was a big one to him, you know? And he had a nervous breakdown. He had a nervous breakdown. And, you know, we speak of the joy and the sorrow. I don't think that there would be any need for sorrow if this man hadn't been boycotted out of the industry. You know, he's lying dormant in Memphis, and if he was out here applying his craft, you know what people ask me when I try to tell them about Phineas Newborn and some clubs? What is his hit record? Genius don't need a hit record. So, you know, this is, and the fact that, you know, sometimes he seemed to be tentative on certain things, he has every right to be. Lucky Thompson was put on a white list some years ago.
Saxophonist.
One of our very important people. I mean, he's one of our most important saxophonists. He fits right into the scheme of things. Somebody didn't like him up there. And they said, you're finished in this business all over the world, and you never heard another Lucky Thompson record? You never heard another engagement by Lucky Thompson? That's another great American tragedy. He's somewhere on an island in South Carolina. Who knows what he's doing? Maybe he's on medication too. He could be on medication too.
So saying this is part of a plan? Or
it's a definite plan. Now, let me tell you this, what the very recent is. I'm seeing white artists coming out of retirement because the pieces are in place where they're burying the genius, they're burying the kings. The kings are being buried, the Frank Fosters. Look, if Frank Foster wrote Shiny Stockings, remember that? When the Count Basie's hits. If he had been in the white skin, that would carry him for the rest of his days. The same like Bluesette carried Tooth Stillman. That's the only one he wrote, right? The Moon. Frank Foster, king. George Coleman, king. Lou Donaldson, king. And he go, Ahmed Jamal, wait a minute. If he was Liberace, if Liberace could play like that, are you kidding? Come on now. Let's get down to brass tacks. There's a plan afoot to smother the kings and replace them with white kings.
Thus, the joy and the sorrow of a consummate artist, Phineas Newborn. Though his story is indeed one of sorrow, at the same time he has left us a rich recorded legacy. And for those who care to listen, we can find great joy. Like it is, we'll look at a pianistic colossus in a moment, Art Tatum.
This woman, she's so alive. She's got savvy, she's got drive.
Art Tatum was born on October 13th, 1910 in Toledo, Ohio, legally or technically blind. No vision at all in one eye, very limited vision in the other. Tatum's parents were musical. His mother played piano. His father from North Carolina played guitar, although not professionally. By the time Art Tatum was 20 years old, he was a fully developed pianist, although he had been dabbling in music since he was a mere toddler. Interestingly, he didn't start out at the piano. The violin was his first choice, but things didn't go well at that instrument, and he shifted to the piano. Tatum's awesome technique and style was the outgrowth of the style of many pianists who had preceded him, like Meade Lux Lewis. Other boogie-woogie stylists also influenced the development of Art Tatum, as did ragtime piano, immortalized by U.B. Blake. An exponent of Blake's rag style was Willie the Lion Smith, whose striding left-hand style also influenced Tatum. Fats Waller was a monumentally gifted pianist, although this clip doesn't reveal it, who was a major influence on Art Tatum. And then there was Earl Father Hines, who emphasized the right hand, incorporating strong octaves with dazzling runs. Tatum listened closely and copped. Art Tatum took these styles, embellished and extended it to staggering proportions. Tatum was truly and richly endowed by the musical gods, with a talent that forced all musicians with any sense to stop dead in their tracks and listen whenever and wherever he played. Many of his contemporaries found him terrifying because of his artistic prowess.
Also, Art Tatum was on the bill. It was Benny Carter's band, King Cole Trio, and Art Tatum.
He's a pretty fair piano player.
Oh!
Did he have the same impression on you?
Of me?
Did he have the same, did he make the same impact on you? Did he shape?
Oh, yeah, I'm afraid so. He made the same impact on everybody.
To underscore the weight of Mr. Peterson's statement, let's take a look at Peterson's playing. Now, when a man of this greatness speaks in such revered tones of Art Tatum, maybe you can get an idea of what Art Tatum's ability was about.
To me, he still is the all-time genius of the instrument, and I don't bar the classical field when I say that. I include the classical field in it for a very definitive reason. And I don't want to start a big controversy about this, but I feel that it's one thing to be able to play classical music, and I'm not speaking disparagingly about it because there are some geniuses in that field also, obviously. But for a man to come up with the kind of improvisational depth and conception and control that he had, and the pianistic insights that he had, the harmonic and tonal sense and rhythmic balance that he had, this is unusual. And when you see classical players, and I won't call names, but well-known classical players, scurrying down to listen to a jazz pianist, there's something going. And Art Tatum was that kind of genius. He was a master of the keyboard.
Suffice it to say that his dominance as a pianist was total. Whether they played the European classics or the American classics, they all acknowledged that Tatum was a master. Yet, Tatum was denied the prestige that his greatness certainly deserved. He didn't make a lot of money, nor did he appear in many films. In the few that he was in, very little of his music was heard without dialogue over it or without the conflict of other melody instruments.
Because I brought to you tonight.
No, I sort of wish we could have been alone. I had something I wanted to tell you.
What?
I finished the concerto.
Oh, Bob, that's wonderful.
And so aside from a few stills and even fewer motion picture clips, that's about it. But his musical excellence was such that we nonetheless must try to give you a sense of his greatness. Jackie Byard is a contemporary pianist who was greatly influenced by the music of Art Tatum. Much of his technique approaches the Tatum-esque, and in listening to him play, one gets a sense of what was involved in playing anything like an Art Tatum. Do you remember the first time you heard Art Tatum?
Yes, 1943, 41.
Were you playing the piano at the time?
Yeah.
What was your reaction?
Stunned. You understand what I mean? Because I never thought, see, we're listening to Basie, Waller, King Cole, and most of us will listen to those piano players then. And here comes a man that just completely destroys that whole syndrome of just regular piano playing, and including the piano playing of people like James P. Fats. It's stunning. You know, was saying, what the hell is he doing? You know? What is he doing?
Did he have that effect on all the piano players? Most of them?
Most piano players that have a knowledge of the piano itself and the historical fact of the piano. There are some piano, I've heard it state that he didn't play hip, they said. So I accept that, you know. So he didn't play hip. But I thought he played wonderfully and great and graciously, too. You know?
Well, tell me what it is that made him such an extraordinary pianist. Let's take it apart. What was it that made him so great?
Well, his use of most of the piano techniques of, say, pianists back in 1700, right up to 18, right up to today. He used all the techniques, plus adding his own concept. That is to say, especially toward reharmonization. And as I stated before, completely becoming involved not only in your simple intervals, but your compound intervals. And here lately, I've discovered he even went into, I call it auxiliary compound intervals. And that is this harmonic approach within the 3 octaves of the piano. 1, 2, 3, yeah. And there's certain things that he would play that's included in the scope here, because your simple intervals only include the triads and sevenths and so on and so forth. Well, then he became involved with the compound intervals, which include all the degrees from the 2 or 3 octaves from the 9th degree right up to the 15th, the 23rd, and the 4th, and all the other degrees included in the 3 octaves. Maybe some analysts might not agree, but however, if they don't agree with it, I say that's through my analysis, that's the scope of his style.
So one of the great tools that he had was his sense of harmony, the way in which he developed
sense of harmony and rhythm.
It wasn't
perfect timing.
It wasn't that he was just fast.
No, it wasn't that. He just was a very knowledgeable person, obviously, because he studied a great deal. Well, historical facts state that he did study piano from the piano players back in 1700, 1800, Chopin, Beethoven. And you can hear that in his playing. It's like the insert of certain little things. I know one thing he inserts is Paderewski's Humoresque, which is very interesting.
What about his use of the pentatonic scale? What is the pentatonic scale, and how did he use it?
Well, according to my research on it, it's the pentatonic scale derived from the major diatonic scale, which is the 4th. There's your major diatonic scale, the 4th and 7th degree omitted. Right? There's your pentatonic scale. He used to use that, especially in descending arpeggios and descending runs. This scale, it was stated they didn't know whether it was that it originated in Scotland or Africa. Well, it's a big joke to me because, let's say it's in Africa because there are several other people that have gone into the study of this pentatonic scale.
Like?
Well, Paul Robeson, you say, yeah. And then there's Debussy, of course, had gone to Africa. And he didn't go to China or Japan. because travel at that time was pretty, well, to go to Africa was no problem, especially being in Europe. And I know he used, all the Impressionistic people used this scale quite extensively.
Give me an example of how Art used the pentatonic scale.
Well, he would possibly give her like a little roll. Or he would go, oh, Jesus, excuse me. And or he'd say,
the tough Northeast winter is here. And if you don't want to go through it again this year without front-wheel drive, it's time to see your Datsun dealer. He has a full line of high-mileage front-wheel drives to help you through snow and ice. Get the jump on Old Man Winter now, while we still have a great selection, because your Datsun dealer can make winter driving fun again.
Come alive. Come drive the front-wheel drives at your nearby Datsun dealers.
He was one of America's most powerful mobsters. Now his daughter reveals his relationship with Frank Sinatra in this week's Star.
I'll tell you why I'll never forgive Sinatra and how my father was connected to Hollywood stars.
Plus his intimate link to the Kennedys.
It's the inside story of my life as a mafia princess.
Also in the Star, meet Hollywood's happiest loser, James Coco.
With the special diet that finally worked for me. And if it helped me lose weight, it may help you.
Find out where everyone finds out. Check out the Star this week.
Team up with Storm Field, Spencer Christian, and Ira Joe Fisher.
Here's to the team. We're with you all the way.
Team up with Eyewitness News.
Going back to that rare Tatum clip we showed earlier, you may not have noticed the guitarist in his group. His name, Lloyd Tiny Grimes. Mr. Grimes was with Tatum for several memorable years.
Like I say, I always say it was an honor, but it was not too much of a pleasure because I hadn't been playing that long. The experience wasn't there. I used to call myself, they used to laugh at me, I used to call myself the low man on the Tatum pole. And they would always kid me, but I think I stayed there so long as an A for effort. I tried so hard with only having 4 strings, you know.
What was the hardest thing about trying to keep up with him? What made it so hard?
The man, he was so gifted. I couldn't play my guitar for looking at him. You know, see his hands going, you know, and until it was quite a while till I could get accustomed to being in that environment, you know. And doing intermissions, we were playing at a place, they would have to come get me because I'd be downstairs practicing, trying my best, you know, practicing to keep up with he and Slam. Because they got, first of all, they got the perfect pitch. You could hear an automobile horn blower, they can tell you exactly what key or is between the keys or anything. They're very, very gifted people, you know.
Did they do a lot of rehearsing?
No. None. The whole time we were together, I think we had, I would say, a half of a rehearsal. We made an attempt in Washington, and it was a nightclub we were playing, Crystals or Caverns or something. And while we were trying to get Minuet and G together, there were people around, you know, it was a little bar and customers were coming in, and we couldn't get nothing done. Because people would say, hey, play something, you know how they do. You know, we try to practice to get something. That's the only rehearsal we ever had, and didn't finish that, and we never had another rehearsal.
So then, how, you just had to be ready to go into whatever he went into?
Yes. Wherever his hands hit the piano, that's where he started playing.
In any key?
No matter what key. I remember the first thing he dropped on me was Rosetta in B natural. And I said, man, then the pace would be terrific, really going. And he would turn around to me, he used to call me Grimy.
He said, okay, Grimy, you got it. I said, I don't want it. It's too hard for you. All got it, man. And it was such an effort to try to keep up with those guys that I had quite a bit of solos planned. And I know what I was going to do because they were going so fast all the time.
Did he ever leave you? Musically?
Leave me? How do you mean?
Did he ever hang you?
Oh, I was always. I was always. It was a guessing job to try to play, and the songs that he would pick were out of sight. You know, no one else hardly even played them. Then when they were played, most of them were so fast.
What do you think is involved, just to give our audience, many of whom are not musicians, what is involved in developing into the kind of pianist that he was?
Practice and study, plenty of practice.
Hour after hour, year after year?
Yeah, more than obvious. You must have practiced a great deal. Yeah, because...
Now, I notice that you play sort of flat-fingered, and
yes,
and word has it that Art did too.
Yeah.
But we understand that most music teachers, quote-unquote classic, say you're supposed to curl your fingers when you
Yes, well, that happens. We do that. I know sometimes I'll play like that also. But the fact that we're involved, as I said before, with the compound intervals, and you're going to play a chord, and you have to stretch your hand, you very well can't do it like that. However, if you're playing like this, it's good for playing Bach, Mozart, and the facility and your ability to articulate the tones neatly and clearly. It's good for that technique. But the impressionistic technique and the technique that we use as piano players, it's much more comfortable because you're going to hit that chord, or so you're going to say. There's no way I could hit that with my hands cupped. I'd look pretty sick. Yeah, well, it's impossible, you know. So you have to more or less keep your fingers at that level, which is a good level. And it's more of a natural position also, see, rather than this. Well, that's open for debate, you know.
Tatum, then, what does he really mean to you? What does he mean to Jackie Byard?
Well, it's one of my, let's say, first teachers, more or less, through watching him, you know. I remember seeing him back at 52nd, on 52nd Street, billed with, may I name drop, with Earl Garner, a fellow named Ernie Washington, and Art Tatum on the same bill. 52nd Street. I think it was the Three Deuces or the Keyboard, all for $2.25. 3 beers. I got juice that night. And and one of the first things that I learned from watching him was the use of his parallel thirds in motion and his and the pentatonic scale here.
Show them.
If I may say, see, I think I used it in one of the. Now that's on the white keys. Now on the black key. Was just cupping his fingers this way here, back and forth, and he'd get all these different effects. And it's a good thing for technique. For a contemporary sound, you really get some nice effects, especially with the black and the white keys. That was one lesson.
He'd show you anything you could, but the only thing you had to catch it. You know, he wouldn't sit down and pick it out to you, show you like that. You know, you could sit up there and watch him all night and then play, and he'd play anything that you would ask him. But I don't think even if he were to sit down and show you, you couldn't do it, because he just had that gift. He could do more things with one hand than then 2 or 3 guys could do with both hands.
Was it a gift, or was it that he just practiced harder than anybody else?
I never saw him practice. As long as I was with him, I never saw him practice. None of us practiced. I did the practicing, you know.
Where do you think he got that style? Who influenced him to approach his instrument like that?
I don't know. From what I've heard, he was just an unknown guy in Toledo, playing like this, and this singer, I forgot what her name was, heard him, and she brought him to New York, and the word got out immediately. Oh yeah, and then the thing of it is, see, they used to have, when he first hit town, they ganged up on him. They called all the good piano players to the after-hour spot in some basement, and they would all come around and play. I mean, all from Jersey, from everywhere. But Tatum was smart. He would never play until everybody else had played. He let them all play, and then he would sit down, and that was it. He'd wash them all away, every one of them. But he had delicate hands to be a large man. Very delicate, small, you know, and limber, thin.
He had a very light touch, didn't he?
Yeah, oh, that man. I don't see how he did it. And I was right there with him, and I don't see how he could do the things that he did with one hand, not two, just one hand. And it's unbelievable, and guys up to this date can't do it.
Mr. Grimes is right. There have been pianists who followed Tatum who had his speed, some who had his rhythmic sense, others his sense of harmony, and a few his touch. But there hasn't been anyone who put it together quite like Art Tatum. This then is why anyone who has seriously approached piano playing and has heard Art Tatum must admit that his was the standard of excellence for pianists to try to live up to. We cannot close this program with any new footage of Mr. Tatum because we simply weren't able to come up with any. But we are fortunate to have this film of Mr. Jackie Byard, who by his own brilliance keeps alive the brilliant pianistic legacy of Art Tatum.